You ever feel like your to read list is super big? Like as big as all the books behind me? So do I, because mine actually is that big. I think most of those books I've not read, I just want to. How do we find more time though for reading? Well, let me give you 5 tips that I find helpful in my own life. So, thing 1, when you're an hour or so away from bedtime, make sure that you turn all your electronics off. Store those things away. I literally like to chuck my phone in a drawer and have a book handy, a book that you're interested in reading. It's a great time to read at night. Gets your body ready to quietly enter into rest. And it's a time when you can read books. Or, you know what else you could do? Tip number 2, wake up just a little bit earlier. Rise a bit early, get some coffee, steeping, or some tea, or what have you. And grab that book that you've been meaning to read a bit more of. And don't get your device out of the drawer. Don't turn any electronics on until you've spent at least, well, you decide, however much time reading. Maybe it's 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Maybe it's just 5. Or maybe it's a chapter of a book. But before you rush into your day, start with reading. Here's another way to have more time. Tip 3, the next time that you want to check the news, don't, and instead read a book. It stands to reason that the news article you read today has a really good chance of being almost inconsequential in a month. But the book that you choose to read today has a way smaller chance of being inconsequential in a month. Books take longer to write than news articles. Books represent more of a risk for a publisher and an author, risk in terms of time, risk in terms of resources in developing the book. And so in general, books have to pass a higher threshold of likelihood for being useful to your life or meaningful to your life over the longer term than the news. So take your news time, and with its super addicting qualities, that might be a lot, and put it into book reading. 4th tip, do the same thing, but for social media feeds. Social media feeds are even more ephemeral and even less likely to matter in a month than news feeds. And I guess some social media feeds are called news feeds, but that's propaganda, because it's just posts made by people really quickly with their thumbs, usually. So again, the next time that you want to scroll through a feed, grab that book. But Dave, I scroll through my feed in the checkout line at the grocery store. We'll get a little book in your purse or your pocket or what have you, and read that book in the checkout line. Or you could just sit in the checkout line without anything to do. That's good for you too. That's the 4th tip. When you want to check social media, check out a book instead. The final tip, the 5th tip, is to only read books that you really want to read. Whenever possible, don't get yourself into situations where you just have no desire to read a book. Because books that you really want to read are going to naturally draw you into finding more time to read them. So it doesn't mean you only read immediately gratifying books or books that are just entertaining or whatever. But it does mean that when you sit down with a book, first give it an inspectional read so that you have a sense of what's in the book. And then see if what's in the book aligns with burning questions that you currently have as a teacher or a person or whatever. Because if there's some burning urgency behind the reading of the book, then you're more likely to want to find an extra snippet of time here and there to read. And so book reading becomes not this like have to thing that you're adding on to the burden of life and becomes instead a get to, because that's the truth. We get to read, and that's a privilege and a pleasure. I hope this helps you find some ways to get a little more reading time in each day. What works for you? How do you find extra time to read books? Share that in the comments.